It was tall, over 8 feet, skeletal thin, but with massive shoulders and long arms. Its skin was grayish-white, tight over prominent bones. The face was elongated, more animal than human, with sunken eyes that burned with a yellow light. And antlers. It had antlers growing from its skull, twisted and broken, like a deer's rack, but wrong, growing at angles that shouldn't be possible. It opened its mouth, and that sound came out again, that howl scream we'd heard before. Up close, it was overwhelming, paralyzing. Every instinct I had was telling me to run, but I couldn't move. Mike grabbed my arm and yanked me backward, breaking the spell. We ran, not on the trail, just straight back the way we'd come, crashing through the snow, branches whipping our faces. Behind us, we could hear it following. Not running, just walking, but somehow keeping pace with us easily, making that terrible sound over and over. We made it to camp and threw everything we could grab into our packs. We didn't bother with the tent or most of our equipment. We just needed to get out of those mountains. We hiked 14 miles through deep snow in under 4 hours, moving faster than should have been possible, driven by pure terror. We didn't see it again, but we heard it, following us, watching us, making sure we left. When we finally reached the road where my truck was parked, the sound stopped. The forest went quiet. We drove to the DNR office in Ontonagon and filed our report. They didn't believe us. Of course they didn't. We sounded insane. We had no photographic evidence. Our trail cameras were still up in the mountains, and neither of us was willing to go back to retrieve them. We tried to explain what we'd seen, but we could tell they thought we'd had some kind of shared hallucination. Maybe hypothermia, maybe carbon monoxide exposure from our camp stove. They sent another team up 2 weeks later to investigate. That team found our camp. What was left of it? The tent had been shredded, our equipment scattered, and they found tracks. Lots of tracks. The DNR report lists them as unusual canine tracks, possibly hybrid wolf dog. But one of the rangers from that team called me privately afterward. He said they found something else they didn't put in the official report. Another arranged bone site, this one different from the others. The bones were from a human. Old bones, maybe decades old, but definitely human. And they'd been arranged in the same pattern as the deer bones. Skulls facing each other, leg bones in a circle. The ranger told me the Ojibwe elder from the reservation nearby visited the site and performed some kind of ceremony. Afterward, the elder told the rangers that the Wendigo had been in these mountains for longer than anyone could remember. It protected them, in a way, by keeping people out. And it made sure anyone who ventured too deep either left or stayed forever. I don't work in the Upper Peninsula anymore. I took a position tracking wolves in Wyoming, where the mountains are different, where the forests don't feel so oppressive, where the winter is cold but doesn't carry that same sense of ancient hunger. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear that sound. That howl scream that isn't quite wolf and isn't quite human. And I wonder how many other places in the northern forests have their own version of what we found. How many other wilderness areas have things living in them that shouldn't exist, that science can't explain, that have been there long before us and will remain long after we're gone. The Porcupine Mountains are still open to hikers and campers. People go there every year, in summer and winter. Most of them come back with stories of beautiful scenery and wildlife sightings. But every few years, someone goes into those mountains and doesn't come back. Search teams find no trace. The forest swallows them completely. The DNR chalks it up to accidents, exposure, people unprepared for wilderness conditions. Maybe that's true most of the time, but I know there's at least one other reason people disappear in those mountains, and it has nothing to do with weather or terrain. It has to do with something that walks on 2 legs and 4, something that arranges bones like it understands symbolism, something that burns with a hunger that can never be satisfied. The Ojibwe were right to fear it. They were right to give it a name and tell stories to keep people away. The Wendigo is real. I've seen it. And it's still up there in the Porcupines, waiting for the next person who ventures too deep into winter's heart. The Porcupines are remote, a state wilderness area in the Upper Peninsula that stretches for thousands of acres. Heavy forest, steep ridges, and in winter, deep snow that keeps most people out. Perfect wolf habitat. And we'd been getting reports of an unusually large pack operating in the area. Local hunters and DNR officers reported finding kill sites with dozens of deer carcasses, far more than a normal pack would take. Someone even reported seeing a wolf that was massive, bigger than any gray wolf on record. I was contracted by the DNR to investigate, determine pack size, and assess whether the population was healthy or if something unusual was happening. I've tracked wolves all over North America. I know their behavior, their hunting patterns, their pack dynamics. This should have been routine work. I went in mid-January with a graduate student assistant named Mike Chen. We set up a base camp near the Lake of the Clouds overlook and started our survey. The plan was to use tracking collars, trail cameras, and direct observation to study the pack for 3 weeks, then write a comprehensive report. The first sign something was wrong came on day 3. We found a kill site that didn't make sense. 2 deer, completely consumed, except for the bones. Nothing unusual there. Wolves are efficient, but the bones were arranged, not scattered by feeding like they should be, but laid out in a pattern, almost like they'd been positioned deliberately. The skulls were placed facing each other, and the leg bones formed a circle around them. Mike thought it was weird, but not necessarily unnatural. Animals can do strange things. Sometimes predators will cache bones in specific locations. I agreed it was odd, but explainable. We took photos and moved on. We started finding tracks. Large canine prints, definitely wolf, but the size was remarkable. I've seen big wolves before. Males can hit 150 pounds, and their tracks are impressive. But these were something else. Each print was over 7 inches long, larger than my hand, pressed deep into the snow. And they were everywhere, like the pack was huge or incredibly active. We set up trail cameras at several locations where we'd found tracks and kill sites. Modern trail cameras are remarkable. They're motion-activated, infrared, can capture images day or night. Within 2 days, we started getting hits. But the images didn't show what we expected. Most of the photos were standard. Deer passing through, smaller animals, even a fox once. But 3 cameras captured something else. Something big moving through the frame. Too fast for the camera to focus properly. Just a blur of motion. Massive size. Moving on all 4s, but with a gait that looked wrong. Not how wolves move. Not how any quadruped moves. Mike suggested they were image artifacts. Problems with the camera's shutter speed or exposure. That made sense. Technical glitches happen. But when we retrieved the SD cards and examined the images more carefully, we noticed something that made us both uncomfortable. Whatever the blur was, it had been directly approaching each camera when the photo triggered, not passing by. Moving toward the camera. And in the last image from each sequence, you could see it was close. Less than 10 feet away. Right before the camera stopped recording. We checked the cameras. 2 of them had been moved, picked up and repositioned so they faced the trees instead of the trail. The 3rd was gone entirely. Just the mounting strap was left, torn apart like something had ripped it off. But the description matched what we were tracking. Something large, fast, wrong. Something that moved through territory like it owned it, that arranged bones like it was intelligent, that approached our cameras like it knew what they were. On day 14, we saw it. Mike and I were doing a snow track survey, following a fresh trail that led into a dense stand of hemlocks. The snow was deep, over our knees, and the forest was quiet. Too quiet. No birds, no squirrels, nothing. The tracks led to a clearing where we found another arranged kill site. But this one was different. The deer wasn't just consumed. It was butchered with precision. The hide had been removed carefully, the meat stripped from the bones in a way that required hands, not teeth. And in the snow around the carcass, there were other prints, not wolf prints, human prints. Barefoot human prints in the snow, in temperatures well below 0. Mike started backing away immediately. He knew, just like I knew, that something was fundamentally wrong with what we were seeing. But I was transfixed. I needed to understand. I knelt down to examine the human prints more closely. That's when I smelled it. A stench like nothing I've ever encountered. Rot and cold and something else. Something that made my hindbrain scream danger. I looked up, and it was there, standing at the edge of the clearing, maybe 30 yards away, watching us. Before he left, Tom told me one more thing. He said if I saw lights anywhere else on the island during winter, I should report it immediately. Poachers occasionally tried to access the island despite it being illegal, and I needed to let the mainland know if anyone was trespassing. Then the boat left, and I was alone, truly alone, for the first time in my life. The first month was incredible. I fell into a routine quickly. Wake up, maintain the fire, check the facilities, take long hikes through the snowy forest, cook simple meals, read by lamplight, sleep. The silence was profound. No traffic, no voices, no phones ringing. Just the sound of wind in the trees and waves against the shore. I'd never been so at peace. The island has a wolf population, one of the most studied in the world. I saw their tracks in the snow, but never the animals themselves. They kept their distance. The moose were bolder, and I'd sometimes see them browsing near the cabin. It was like living in a nature documentary, except I was the only person in it. Everything changed in mid-December. I was sitting by the fire one evening when I saw lights across the harbor. Not flashlights or headlamps. These were steady, warm lights, like candles or lanterns, shining from the windows of the old hotel. Multiple windows, all lit up like the place was occupied. I grabbed my binoculars and looked closer. The lights were definitely coming from inside the building, flickering like flames. But that was impossible. There was no electricity to the hotel, and I was the only person on the island. I grabbed my satellite phone to call it in, like Tom had instructed. But before I could dial, the lights went out, all at once. The hotel was dark again. I stood there for a long time, watching, waiting for the lights to come back. They didn't. Eventually, I convinced myself it was just reflected moonlight on the windows or something, but I didn't sleep well that night. Every sound outside made me jump. Every creak of the cabin made me think someone was there. The next morning, I hiked over to the hotel to investigate. The snow around the building was undisturbed except for animal tracks. No human footprints anywhere. All the doors were locked, just as they should be. I walked around the entire perimeter, checking every entrance. Nothing. I even looked in the windows, and the interior was empty, dusty, exactly as it should be for a building that had been closed for decades. I convinced myself I'd imagined it. Isolation does things to your mind. I'd read about that. Sensory deprivation can cause hallucinations. I was seeing things because my brain was bored, creating stimulation where there wasn't any. That made sense. That was rational. But the lights came back 2 nights later. Same time, same windows, same flickering glow. This time, I was ready. I'd charged my camera and had it by the door. I grabbed it and took a dozen photos of the hotel before the lights went out again. When I reviewed the images, my hands started shaking. The lights showed up in the photographs. They were real, not reflections. And in one of the shots, I could see a figure in one of the windows. Just a silhouette, but definitely human-shaped, standing perfectly still, looking out toward my cabin. I called the mainland on the satellite phone. They were concerned, but not panicked. They said it was probably poachers who'd come over on snowmobile before the ice got too thin. They'd send someone to check it out as soon as weather permitted, but that might be weeks. In the meantime, I should lock my cabin and stay inside after dark. Great advice, except I was trapped on an island with someone who shouldn't be there, and I had no way to defend myself. The Park Service doesn't allow caretakers to carry guns. Wildlife policy. If a bear breaks into your cabin, you're supposed to scare it off with noise. But this wasn't a bear. The lights appeared every night after that, always in the old hotel, always in the same windows. I stopped going outside after sunset. I kept the cabin locked, kept the fire going hot, and tried not to think about who or what was over there watching me. Then the footprints appeared. I woke up one morning to find tracks in the snow leading from the hotel toward my cabin. They came to within 20 feet of my door, then stopped. Just stopped. No tracks leading away. It was like whoever made them vanished right there in the snow. The prints were odd. They looked human at first glance, but wrong somehow. Too long, too narrow. And they were deep, pressing into the snow more than regular footprints should. Whatever made them was heavy. I took photos and sent them to the mainland. They said they'd escalate the situation, try to get someone out to me sooner. But Lake Superior was having one of its worst ice years in decades. The ice was forming, but not solid enough to support a snowmobile. Too dangerous. I'd have to wait. The university never did their documentary. They said the wreck site was too dangerous, too deep, for the kind of extensive filming they wanted. But I think they saw something in the footage that scared them. Sarah's camera kept rolling when we were fighting that thing. I never asked to see the video, and I never will. Superior is the coldest, deepest, and deadliest of all the Great Lakes. It's claimed over 10,000 ships and 30,000 lives. That's what the historians say. But I think the real number is higher. I think some people go into that water and just disappear, taken by something we don't understand and can't fight. My grandfather used to say, Superior never gives up her dead. I always thought he meant the cold water kept bodies from surfacing. Now, I know he meant something else. The dead don't leave because they can't. They're held there, preserved, transformed into something that belongs to the lake more than it ever belonged to the living world. I drive past Whitefish Point sometimes, where the Great Lakes Shipwreck Museum sits overlooking the water. They have a memorial there listing all the names of those lost in Superior. Hundreds and hundreds of names carved in stone. But stone is permanent. It's final. What's down in that water isn't final. It's waiting, watching, patient. I'll never know for sure if what grabbed me was Dennis Hale, or one of the other 27 who died with the Morel, or something older, something that's been in Superior since before ships ever sailed its waters. But I know this. I was touched by something that shouldn't exist, marked by something that belongs to depths no human should explore. Sometimes, late at night, I can still feel that cold grip on my ankle. And sometimes, I dream I'm back in the pilot house of the Morel, sitting at that wheel, and I can't let go. I'm steering a ship that's already broken apart, taking it down into darkness that has no bottom, while faces press against the portholes, watching, waiting for me to join them. The Great Lakes don't give up their dead. They keep them, preserve them, use them, and someday, maybe, they'll come for me too. Because once you've been touched by Superior, once you've seen what lives in those depths, you belong to the lake. You're just waiting for it to decide when to collect what you owe. Royale, isolation. My name is Rebecca Thompson. I'm 31 years old, and I used to think isolation was peaceful. I used to seek it out, in fact. That's why I applied for the winter caretaker position on Royale. If you don't know, Royale is a wilderness island in the middle of Lake Superior, 45 miles from the nearest mainland. It's a national park, but only in summer. From November through April, the island is completely closed to visitors. The Park Service maintains one winter caretaker to watch over the facilities and keep an eye on things. I was perfect for the job. I had wilderness experience, a degree in environmental science, and most importantly, I wanted to be alone. I'd just gone through a brutal divorce, lost my job due to downsizing, and I needed to get away from everything. 6 months on an island with no people, no internet, no connection to the world that had fallen apart around me. It sounded like paradise. The park superintendent who hired me was honest about the challenges. The island would be completely cut off once the lake froze. No boat access, and even float planes couldn't land once the ice started forming but wasn't yet solid. I'd have a satellite phone for emergencies and weekly radio check-ins with the mainland, but otherwise, I'd be on my own. Completely, totally alone. That sounded perfect to me. They dropped me off in early November, just before the last ferry stopped running. The ranger who brought me over, a guy named Tom, gave me a thorough orientation. He showed me the cabin where I'd be staying, taught me how to use the wood stove, explained the backup generator, and walked me through the emergency protocols. The cabin was on the shore of Rock Harbor, the main marina area, comfortable enough with 2 rooms, a kitchen, and plenty of firewood stacked outside. Tom also showed me the old hotel, which sits right on the water. It's been closed since the 1960s, but the building is still standing, used for storage now. He told me to stay out of there unless absolutely necessary. The structure wasn't maintained, and parts of it were dangerous. I asked why they didn't just tear it down, and he got this odd look on his face. Things happen in old buildings, he said, especially in winter. Just stay in your cabin, follow the routine, and you'll be fine. I laughed that off. I didn't believe in ghosts or curses or whatever he was hinting at. Old buildings creak in winter. That's just physics. But I could tell Tom was serious, and he'd been working this park for 20 years. He knew the island better than anyone, but we were both thinking the same thing. We had to get away from that wreck, and we had to get away now. We made it about 50 feet up when I felt something grab my fin. I looked down and saw him, the body from the wreck. It had followed us up, was swimming with perfect form, one hand locked around my fin. The face was different now. The flesh was starting to peel away, revealing bone underneath. But the eyes were still moving, still watching me. I kicked hard, trying to break free. Sarah saw what was happening and came back down to help me. She had a dive knife, and she slashed at the thing's arm. The blade went right through it, like it was made of jelly, but it didn't let go. Instead, it reached up with its other hand and grabbed Sarah's leg. We both kicked and fought, using up air we couldn't afford to waste. The thing's grip was impossibly strong, cold even through my dry suit. It was pulling us back down toward the wreck, and we were running out of options. I could see Sarah's air gauge. She was nearly empty. So was I. That's when I remembered something my grandfather told me. He said Superior doesn't give up its dead because they belong to the lake now. They're part of it. And the only way to make the lake let go is to give it something else to take instead. I don't know if I really believed that or if I was just desperate, but I took off my weight belt, all 15 pounds of lead, and let it drop. The thing watched it fall, and for just a second, its grip loosened. That was enough. Sarah and I kicked hard, ascending faster than we should have, but at that point, the bends were better than whatever that thing was. We broke the surface gasping, and the crew hauled us onto the boat. We were both shaking, both talking at once, trying to explain what had happened. They thought we had nitrogen narcosis, that we were hallucinating from too much nitrogen in our blood at depth. But Sarah and I knew what we'd seen. We went to the hospital in Sault Ste. Marie, got checked for decompression sickness. We were lucky. Neither of us had any symptoms, but the doctors couldn't explain the marks on our legs where that thing had grabbed us. They looked like frostbite, like we'd been touched by something frozen solid, in September, in dry suits, at 200 feet where the water is a constant 38 degrees. The university wanted us to go back down, complete the documentation. We refused. They were angry, said we were breaking our contract. I told them they could sue me. I wasn't going near that wreck again. Sarah backed me up. Eventually, they hired another team to do the dive. That team came back with photographs showing the pilot house was empty. No body. No man at the wheel. Nothing. They said we must have seen a fishing net or piece of debris, that our lights and imaginations created the figure. But I've seen fishing nets at depth. I've seen debris. I know the difference between that and a corpse that moves. I looked into the history of the Morel after that. 28 men died when she broke apart. Only one survived, a young watchman named Dennis Hale, who clung to a life raft for 38 hours in freezing conditions. He was rescued, but he was never the same. Suffered from survivor's guilt his whole life. He died in 2015, and at his funeral, his family said he'd always talked about the men who didn't make it. Said he could feel them out there, still in the water, still waiting. The official story is that the bodies were never recovered because Superior is so cold that it preserves remains but keeps them on the bottom. The cold water is dense, and bodies don't float up like they do in warmer lakes. They stay down there, sometimes for decades, until something disturbs them. But I think it's more than that. I think Superior holds on to its dead because they serve a purpose. They're warnings. They're guardians. They're reminders that the lake doesn't care about human life. Never has. Never will. And when you dive down into its depths, you're entering a place where the rules we understand don't apply. Sarah quit diving after that. She sold all her gear, moved to Arizona, said she never wanted to see another body of water again. I don't blame her. I think about quitting too, but diving is all I know. It's my life. So I still go down, but never on Superior, never that deep, and never, ever on a wreck where men died. I still have the photographs I took before that thing moved. I've studied them hundreds of times. The man at the wheel looked so peaceful in those first shots, like he was just sleeping. But in the last photo I took, right before his eyes moved, you can see something different. His expression changed. And if you look closely at the porthole behind him, you can see other faces. Dozens of them. All the men who went down with the Morel, all still there, all still waiting. I've been diving the Great Lakes for 23 years. My name is Michael Kowalski. I'm 47 years old, and I run a small dive shop in Marquette, Michigan. I've explored dozens of shipwrecks, documented historical vessels, recovered artifacts for museums. The Great Lakes are a graveyard. Thousands of ships rest on the bottom, preserved by the cold fresh water like they sank yesterday. I thought I'd seen everything these lakes had to offer. I was wrong. This happened last September on Lake Superior. I'd been hired by a maritime archaeology group from the University of Michigan to document a wreck they'd located using side-scan sonar. The ship was the SS Edmund Fitzgerald's lesser-known sister vessel, the SS Daniel J. Morel, which broke apart during a storm in 1966. 28 men died that night. Only one survivor. The wreck sat in 220 feet of water, right at the edge of recreational diving limits. The university wanted photographs and video, measurements, any identifying features that could confirm it was the Morel. They were planning a documentary, wanted to bring closure to the families of the crew who'd never been recovered. It was good money, and it was important work. I assembled a team of 3 other experienced divers, all people I'd worked with before. We chartered a boat out of Whitefish Point and reached the coordinates on a clear, cold morning. The water was flat calm, which is rare on Superior. The locals call it a graveyard calm, the kind of stillness that comes before something bad. I should have paid attention to that. My grandfather was a commercial fisherman on Superior his whole life, and he always said, when the lake goes quiet, it's thinking about who to take next. My dive partner was a woman named Sarah Chen, probably the best technical diver I know. We'd explored wrecks together all over the Great Lakes. If something went wrong at depth, Sarah was the person you wanted beside you. We geared up in our dry suits, checked each other's equipment 3 times, and went through our dive plan one more time. Down to the wreck, 30 minutes of bottom time, slow ascent with decompression stops. Standard procedure. The descent was beautiful. Superior's water is incredibly clear, clearer than the ocean. We followed the anchor line down through bands of light, watching the surface disappear above us. At 100 feet, the temperature dropped noticeably even through our dry suits. At 200 feet, we could see the wreck below us, a massive dark shape emerging from the gloom. The Morel was broken in 2, just like the report said. The bow section was lying on its side, and the stern was about 200 yards away. We headed for the bow first, where the pilot house would have been. That's usually where you find the most identifiable features, and often where bodies end up if they didn't make it out. The wreck was covered in zebra mussels and lake growth, but it was remarkably intact. We could see through the broken windows into the pilot house, our lights cutting through the darkness inside. That's when I saw him, a man, sitting at what remained of the helm, hands still on the wheel. He was wearing a life jacket and a heavy coat, exactly what the crew would have worn, and he looked fresh, not like he'd been underwater for 57 years, like he'd drowned yesterday. I signaled to Sarah, pointing at the figure. She saw it too. We approached slowly, cameras ready. Bodies don't normally survive this long in fresh water. The cold preserves things, but not like this. This man's face was intact, eyes open, staring at nothing. His skin was pale, but not bloated or deteriorated. It was impossible. Sarah was filming while I moved closer to get photographs. That's when I noticed his hands. They weren't just resting on the wheel. They were gripping it so hard that his fingers had gone white. And there was something else. His mouth was open, like he was screaming, but no sound. Just that silent scream, frozen in time. I was taking close-up shots when his eyes moved. I swear to God they moved. They shifted, focused on me, and the expression on his face changed from frozen terror to something else. Recognition, maybe, or warning. I jerked backward, nearly dropping my camera. Sarah grabbed my arm, her eyes wide behind her mask. She'd seen it too. Then the body moved, not floating, not drifting in the current. It turned its head slowly, deliberately, to look directly at us. The hands released the wheel, and it pushed itself up from the chair. It should have been impossible. Bodies don't move like that at depth. But this one did. Sarah and I started ascending immediately. We didn't discuss it, didn't signal, just both turned and headed up. You're supposed to ascend slowly, stopping at specific depths to let nitrogen leave your system. Ascending too fast can kill you.